There is a particular kind of joy that has no good word for it in the English language. It is the feeling of returning to a place that kept you, even after you left it. Even if it hadn't been where you did most of your growing up, there are still places that feel like home. Good evening. I'm Sedalia Voss. Tonight's letter did not arrive by post. It was handed to me in person by a woman named Ruth Marshall Calloway, her hair gray with age, who appeared at my door while an old truck idled in the driveway, the silhouette of a person waiting patiently in the driver's seat. She set a shoebox in my hands and said, "I think you'll know what to do with this." Then she returned to the truck and left with her driver before I could offer her so much as a cup of tea. Inside the shoebox were two things: a bundle of letters tied with kitchen twine, and a single photograph of a boy, perhaps 9 years old, standing at the edge of a river with his shoes off and his face turned towards something just outside the frame. On the back of the photograph, in a woman's careful hand, Thomas, enjoying summer. The boy's name was Thomas Calloway. He was Evangeline Marshall's nephew, the son of her younger sister, Lottie Marshall Calloway. He was born in 1906 in Nashville, Tennessee. He grew up in the city but came to Harlan's Hollow every summer as a child. He left both places for good, or so everyone had assumed, at the age of 17. He came back at 24. This is the story why. Pull the covers up. The fire is lit. The Boy Who Came Back. Part 1. What the Valley Was to a Boy. The letters are not Thomas's. They are his mother's, Lottie Marshall Calloway, who wrote to her sister Evie every week for years with the faithful regularity of someone who understood that distance is no reason to stop talking to the people you love. Most of the letters are ordinary: weather, recipes, the minor catastrophes of raising children in Nashville row houses. But scattered through them, the way certain wildflowers scatter through a field without apparent plan, are passages about Thomas. Lottie wrote, "Tommy came home from the Hollow last August, changed in some way. I cannot put my finger on it. Quieter, not sad, more like a person who has just been told something true and is still deciding what to do about it." He was 9 years old that summer. What had changed him, as best as anyone could piece together, was a morning he had spent alone at the river. Evie had taken him there. She did not stay. She had simply shown him the flat rock where his grandmother, Clara, used to play as a child. Evie told him the story about the crawfish, the jar, the man named Calhoun Reed and his cabin, and then she walked back up the bank and left him to sit with it. Thomas sat there for 2 hours. When he came back to the farmhouse for lunch, he ate his meal without speaking, and when Evie asked him what on earth was on his mind, he said, with the sober precision of a 9-year-old in the grip of a large feeling, "I think the river knows something we don't." Evie wrote that down in a letter to Lottie, underlined it, and added, "I don't know where he gets this from," to which Lottie apparently replied, "I know exactly where he gets it from." Part 2. The Leaving. At 17, Thomas spent one last summer in Harlan's Hollow before leaving with the particular conviction of someone who has decided, once and for all, that the life ahead of him is more interesting than the one behind. He was not wrong, exactly. He went to Nashville first, brought his mother a collection of orchard fruits and jams, and then joined a survey crew mapping the western edge of the Appalachian Mountains, which meant he was, in a certain irony nobody failed to notice, spending considerable time in the mountains he had left. He wrote home irregularly, cheerful letters, descriptions of places, not much about himself. Lottie wrote to Evie, "I think Tommy is looking for something. I'm not sure he knows what it is yet." Evie wrote back, "He'll know it when he finds it. He has a good mind and a fine spirit." Years passed and went on without much interruption. That was until 1929. Thomas was 23 years old. In 6 years' time, he had earned a reputation as a hard worker, a bit of a loner, and when he wasn't working, he enjoyed exploring the woods and streams. But in the faraway city of New York, a place that Thomas had only read about but never seen for himself, the devastating Wall Street crash of 1929 rocked the nation that October. The country's finances crumbled. The job and economic losses were far-reaching. Thomas had managed to stay on, working the few surveying jobs that occasionally presented themselves. He watched, though, as other good men, both friends of his and workers with families to feed, moved on in desperate search of wages. It was especially difficult for Thomas to see how the children of these families suffered, becoming thin and frail from hunger. Thomas found some consolation in the woods and streams, but the images of the children remained imprinted in his mind. His explorations began to feel more like searches, although he did not know for what. What Thomas found by the following spring was not a place or a person, but a moment. The kind that arrives without announcement and rearranges things. He had been working a small surveying job near a river in the western part of North Carolina. Early April, the trees not quite leafed out yet. That particular in-between light of early spring when everything looks like it is about to blossom. He was resting alone on a rock above the water, not thinking about anything in particular, when a heron landed on the bank below. It landed without noticing him. It stood there in the shallow water, absolutely still, attention focused on the shadows beneath the surface. Thomas himself sat perfectly still. In that stillness, he felt something move through him that he had not felt in years, since he was 9 years old on a different rock, a flat one that had sat above a different river, listening to his Aunt Evie tell him about a man who had learned to be still enough that the world came to him. He finished his survey. Then he wrote a letter to Evie. It said, "I think I am ready to see the valley again. I miss it." She wrote back by return post. 3 words. "The valley awaits." Part 3. The Return. He arrived on the last Tuesday in May, 1930. Evie was at the schoolhouse. She always was that time of morning. So it was George Pickett Jr. from the neighboring farm who saw the truck first, pulling slowly down the valley road the way someone drives when they are trying to take in all the scenery. George Jr. flagged him down, recognized him eventually, though it took a moment. The boy he remembered had gone lean and sun-dark and wore the look of someone who had been outdoors for years. They shook hands on the road. "You coming to stay?" George Jr. asked. Thomas looked out at the valley, the river catching the morning light, the ridgeline he had spent years occasionally dreaming about without admitting it to himself. "I came back to find out," he said. He drove to the schoolhouse. Evie was at the blackboard when he appeared in the doorway. She turned, looked at him for a long moment, the way you look at someone when you are reconciling the person in front of you with the one you have been carrying in your memory. Then she said with the dry precision he had always loved about her, "You're late." He replied, "Yes, ma'am." She told her students to practice their penmanship. She walked to the door and took his arm and walked him out into the May morning, and they stood there together in the schoolyard while the valley went about its quiet business around them. He told her about the heron, about the rock in the western part of North Carolina, about the moment the survey boss had packed up to move on, and Thomas had stood there and known, with sudden and total clarity, that he was not going with him. Evie listened to her nephew without interrupting. When he had finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you remember what I told you about the river?" He replied, "That it always does exactly what it's supposed to do." She nodded. "So do people," she said, "eventually. Sometimes it just takes them longer to figure things out." Part 4. What he found there. He stayed. Thomas both farmed and took work with a timber surveyor out of Nashville. He remained based in the valley and traveled when he needed to, a life that suited him in the way that certain lives fit certain people so naturally it seems almost unfair to everyone else. He built a small house on the eastern slope above the river with a porch that faced west so he could watch the light leave the valley in the evenings. In his first month back, he walked down to the flat rock. He sat there a long time, perfectly still, watching the birds come and go. He listened intently, mentally identifying each one by their song or call. The following October, he walked to the flat rock again. Someone had placed a jar, as they did every year, containing river water. The water caught the October light. Thomas sat on the rock, closed his eyes, and basked in the sun's warm rays. His thoughts went quiet. When he opened his eyes again, the sun was low on the horizon. Thomas walked back up to the farmhouse where Evie was waiting with supper on the stove. Evie cheerfully began talking about two of her students and how, with quiet satisfaction, they had a remarkable gift for arithmetic. Thomas hung his coat on the hook by the door and sat down at the table. He felt, for the first time in a long time, possibly the first time in his life, entirely at peace and in the right place. Epilogue. A note from Sedalia. Ruth Marshall Calloway, the woman who brought me the shoebox, is Thomas's granddaughter. When I called to tell her I had read the letters, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "He used to say the valley was the best decision he ever made. He even brought his mother back there, took care of her until she passed and kept her letters. But I don't think he thought of it as a decision exactly, more like arriving somewhere you were already headed." Some things, it seems, do not need to be taught. They are carried in the particular way that rivers carry things, quietly, steadily, across distances that would exhaust anyone who thought too hard about them. Rest now. The letter is sealed. I'm Sedalia Voss, and I'll find you again next week. Good night.